Hello, my name is David Nolan, and I'm the host of Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. Today, we are in conversation with Cande Olsen, an actuary in the life practice area with an absolute wealth of Academy volunteer experience. Cande, welcome to Actuary Voices.
Thank you very much for inviting me to share my thoughts on the Actuary Voices podcast.
Well, the pleasure is all ours. Tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your background, and so on.
Okay, well, I grew up in New Jersey, and as many people that might be listening to this podcast know, my father was an actuary working at Prudential, starting at a very low level job in the mailroom right out of high school, until he found out about the actuarial career and how that could lead to a more responsible job. So his ethic was if you're good at math and if you work hard, then you'll be successful. And he was. He became an actuary, was very successful, and he instilled that ethic in me. So he encouraged, as when we were very young, me and my two sisters to excel in math, and he was always ready to help us with our homework. He also entertained us at the dinner table with math games and brain twisters, and including tricks to do multiplication and long division in your head, sometimes putting us on the spot to give answers. So it was more fun and less fun as time went on. But although we were all math majors in college, I was the only one who ended up pursuing an actuarial career. So, based on my dad's encouragement, I took and passed the first actuarial exam while I was still in high school. So, I had taken AP math, and so I really had the background. So, he said, "Hey, you're ready for it." And I was. But I still wasn't sure what career I wanted to prepare for. So, I went off to Smith College to pursue a more general liberal arts education. But after 2 years, I transferred to Williams College, and both of these were in Massachusetts, to study under the famous actuary C. Wallace Jordan, who was a professor there. And he was also, he was a general math professor, and he taught a few actuarial courses, which mainly nobody wanted to take. They were very lightly attended, but I took those courses, and the reason why he was famous, I might add, is that, as all the old timers know, he wrote the first life contingencies textbook that everybody read in the days when we had textbooks. So although it was still a liberal arts math degree, I got to take some actuarial classes. And that was when I passed the second actuarial exam and was ready for a summer intern job. So I got a summer intern job at New York Life, which I just loved. So I continued to work there for the next 35 years. And in the first few weeks of working at New York Life, I remember coming home and telling my father, "I can't believe they pay me to do this." He was so happy. He laughed, but he told everybody that over and over again. So that was my start.
That sounds like dinner time conversations were a lot of fun in the Olsen household, but your father was clearly a very impressive individual, climbing from almost the bottom of the rungs right to the very top. So kudos to him. So after your college career, you'd finished pretty much most of your exams by the time you graduated. Is that right?
Oh, no, 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 because there wasn't any opportunity to study the higher level exams while I was still getting my BA. So I started working at New York Life and studied.
You went to New York Life and then finished your exams there.
Yes, I did.
Okay, you said earlier that you couldn't believe you were getting paid to do what you were doing. But beyond that, what did you find personally fulfilling about your early career years that made you continue?
Well, that's kind of an interesting question because it was really, really a long time ago. And I think that the early years, like the first 10 or 15 years, I spent a lot of time studying and a lot of time doing spreadsheets, but I really enjoyed doing spreadsheets. I would say that the first time I did something that I felt was really, really important, that I have a very, very strong memory of, was in the early 90s. And that's when I got involved in a project that was going to make regulation really, really changed for insurance companies. And that was something that was really, really important to me. The project was working on an academy group that helped the NAIC develop the life risk-based capital formula to set a minimum statutory capital requirement based on the risks the company takes on. Now, prior to that time, most states had fixed capital requirements. So these were really, really exciting times. And so it was my first opportunity to meet key regulators and to see how the regulatory process worked. What part the state regulators played in it, what part the state legislators played in it, etc. And it was very exciting to have input in something that was going to change regulation. I eventually became chair of that academy work group. And although there have been many changes to that formula since that time, the basic structure still stands today. So that makes me feel really good. And it was also an opportunity to meet actuaries in the health and property casualty practice areas, since they were starting work on risk based capital formulas for those practice areas as well. The formulas needed to be the same where the risks were the same, and like, for instance, for investments, and different where they were different, like for the insurance risk. And to add to the challenge, most of the regulators were responsible for implementation of all three risk based capital formulas. And many of them only had experience as life actuaries, and they had to be responsible for a health formula, et cetera. And some of the regulators were not even actuaries at all. So this was probably kind of a lifetime exciting project. Since that time, I was involved in many other projects that supported the NAIC, but the development of the life risk-based capital formula was the biggest effect on my growth as an actuary.
That's very interesting. You're not the first person who's been on Actuary Voices who has said that their work with the NAIC was something that they found immensely fulfilling. The current Academy president, Tom Campbell, also had a similar answer about work he did as a young actuary with the NAIC. So clearly, working there can have a life changing, life impacting effect on people. Many actuaries face professionalism challenges during their career where they are being asked to do things that they don't feel comfortable with. Have you ever had any of those while you've been an actuary, and how have you dealt with them?
I can't say that I have had any challenges like that. In a long career like I have had, there are a lot of challenges one faces in business, but they're just the normal challenges one faces in a responsible job. I can't say that I face professional and ethical challenges. Actually, as I mentioned before, most of my career was spent at New York Life, and management at New York Life had a lot of respect for the opinions and recommendations of actuaries. In addition, actuaries were regularly promoted to high level responsible jobs. And I don't think there were any challenges there. I will have to say that I did face personal challenges, that maybe this would be an opportunity to talk about them um, over the over the past 20 years. Okay. Over that time, my career assignments had taken me away from the more technical aspects of the actuary's work to less actuarial assignments, like getting a promotion to supervise a department that wasn't just actuarial work, or being assigned to work full time in the government relations area. So while this probably started maybe 20 years ago, but while I was moving away from pure actuarial work, the tools for doing the technical work were getting even more sophisticated. That is, the use of vendor software packages that could be adjusted for the specifics of the situation, that could access company databases, etc. I had been used to programming in Fortran and APL and developing our own software. So I wasn't getting any of those experiences. And these non-actuarial assignments were very exciting, and I learned a lot and grew a lot as a person. But you don't realize that when you're away from technical actuarial work for an extended period of time, and the best practices for that work moves on without you, there is unlikely to be an opportunity to move back into the technical side. Now, this is not a regret, just a realization that I never ever considered when I took on those assignments. But I, I still believe that the experiences that you have make you what you are, and the path you thought you would take is never the path you end up taking. So it's all good, and I'm happy in the path that I took.
That is sage advice about trying to stay up to speed with technical issues. Let me take a moment to remind listeners that they're listening to Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. On this podcast, we talk to Academy volunteers and leaders about how they became actuaries and what inspires them about their work, both professionally and as an Academy volunteer. Please subscribe to Actuary Voices on your preferred podcast platform. I now want to move on to your career with the Academy because obviously I feel very privileged and I'm in exalted company because you are going to be the recipient of the Farley Award at this year's annual meeting, at the Academy's annual meeting. And the Farley Award is given to an actuary who has done a huge amount of work on behalf of the American Academy of Actuaries over a whole pile of years. And when I downloaded your volunteer career at the Academy, well, I nearly ran out of ink on my printer. It took so long. So I'm not going to ask you to go through every single position, but I'd love to know what inspired you to become a volunteer in the first place, and then what inspired you even more to take it to such lengths.
That's a good question. I will have to tell you that so much of my enduring memories of my actuarial career came from volunteering. And they all started with another actuary calling me out of the blue and asking me if I was willing to take on an actuarial assignment. Sometimes that was an honor, and I said yes right away. Um, like my most recent assignment, which is on the ASB, thanks to Trisha Matson. But sometimes I it sounded like it might be too time consuming, and I was wondering if I could take it on. And many years ago, uh, Dave Sandberg asked me if a former president of the Academy asked me if I would be willing to chair the Life Products Committee, and I said to him, "Will that take much work?" And he said, "No, no, 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 no. That'll be easy. That won't take much work at all. It'll be really easy for you." So I said, "Well, Dave, okay, I'll do that." Well, it turned out that it took a lot of work. And it wasn't as he said, but I never regretted it for a moment. And that was my general experience with any of the uh, uh, the volunteer responsibilities that I took on. I always got more than I gave. They always turned out to exceed my expectations, and they always turned out to be a special experience. So it's just very hard to say no when you're asked to do one of those things. Now, actually, you have that list. I actually don't have the list, so I'm not really sure. what my first assignment was, but it just seemed like one led to another, and you got known in the community, and they said, "Oh, please, can you do it? We need your help." So after the Life Products Committee, that moved on to being a member of the Life Practice Council, and then that moved on to being vice president of life, chair of the Life Practice Council, and serving on the council on professionalism. And so each one was a learning experience, and uh, something special for me. So hopefully that gives you some light on.
Yeah, it certainly does, and according to our records, your first position was on the Life Practice Council as a member, which began in October '97. But then things came, rapidly snowballed, and there are dozens, if not scores, of entries after that. Sounds like Dave Sandberg. Well, the Academy has a lot to be grateful to him for, and he has a lot to answer for on your behalf. But kudos to him as well.
Well,
Uh,
actually, David, another thing that I might just say is that being chair of a committee, sounds hard, and it could be hard, but sometimes it's all about recruiting the right volunteers to be on the committee that are hardworking and are knowledgeable. And I am so lucky that over the years I have found so many volunteers that are so dedicated and smart and willing to go the extra mile, that makes it a lot easier than it might have been and make it a very rewarding experience.
That's very, very true. There's a misbelief among many people that doing things yourselves means it's much easier. You don't have to explain it and check it and so on. But as you say, finding the right people for the right tasks really, really does make your life an awful lot easier. Um, well, I look forward to your speech, receiving the Jarvis Farley Award early in November, at the Academy's annual meeting. Um, I'd like to move on a little bit now and get your opinions on the future of the actuarial profession and what you foresee as the challenges or opportunities, or however you want to characterize it, in the coming years.
Okay, well, that is an important question. As I said, I've not been involved in the past, recent past, in technical actuarial work. So my opinion comes from actually not being in the trenches. But that being said, I know there will always be other people that can do some of the things that actuaries do. Data scientists come to mind. But I think it will be our challenge to make sure that others, especially the regulatory community, continue to understand that it is only actuaries that are bound by the code of conduct, that have qualification standards, and that have standards of practice that can be relied upon. And we need to continue to make the value of these requirements clear to regulators and other stakeholders.
That's certainly an important task for actuaries moving forward. And do you see the influence, or work of data scientists and big data, itself, as presenting challenges for the profession?
Well, I think there are general challenges in the amount of data that we are allowed to collect now and how we use that data. Um, but I can't say anything up close and personal about what data scientists are doing right now.
Sure. I somewhat hesitate to ask because you have, you involved so heavily with the academy and obviously with your professional life. But what do you do for fun?
Oh well, for fun. Um, I like to do long distance triathlon. And this is an interesting question because it really has a lot of similarities to actuarial work. I am currently training to compete in the Ironman World Championship in Hawaii, scheduled for next October. And now some people may think of an Ironman triathlon as an athletic event. There's a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and a 26.2-mile run. But it's really an exercise in study and planning that requires a competitive drive, just like actuarial training, continuing education, and the execution of project work. You need to train every day, usually 2 workouts a day, and then develop a strategy for completing the race that includes a plan for nutrition, hydration, and pacing yourself that you practice as part of your training. And for the whole 7-hour bike and 5-hour run, you entertain yourself by calculating and recalculating how far behind or ahead you are in your nutrition. That is your eating, your hydration, your drinking, and your pacing, so that you can adjust them before it is too late, just like pricing a product. And of course, you depend upon Garmin computers for the run and the bike to give you the info you need to do your calculations. Doesn't that sound like fun?
It does. It sounds a bit like somebody's dinner table conversations when they were a lot younger. Well, I wish you the very, very best of luck next October in the Hawaiian Ironman competition. But if anyone is equipped with the tools to make it work, you are certainly. Well, finally, Candy, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about you or the profession?
Well, actually, I just wanted to give a couple of thoughts about the concept of the actuarial family. I wonder if there's any other profession or career path where one experiences like a sisterhood or brotherhood concept the way the actuarial profession does. Um, as you grow in your career, actuarial career, you change jobs, volunteer in committees, and otherwise network, and you continue to meet and re-meet actuaries because everyone is a friend of a friend, and you always feel that you can reach out to any of them because they're in your actuarial family. And I talked before about recruiting volunteers, and that's what makes it easy to recruit volunteers. But sometimes the reason is just social. And I've had some great experiences there. As an example, when I was doing a triathlon in Beijing in 2011, my friend and actuary, Henry Siegel, mentioned to me as I was preparing to leave on the trip that a friend of his, Shirley Shao, was living in Beijing working for China Life. I'd met her once years earlier when she was working at Prudential and wasn't sure if she would remember me, but I decided to reach out and say hi based on Henry's recommendation. And she ended up inviting my boyfriend and I to her home, then giving us a tour of the city, ending up with dinner in her favorite restaurant. And that's just one of many examples that I've had of the good feeling you get about being part of the actuarial family. And I just wanted to mention that.
No, I think that's very interesting, and it may have something to do with the fact that, as professions go, the actuarial profession is somewhat smaller than many others. There are 28,000 actuaries in the United States, which may sound like an awful lot, but when you've got tens, hundreds of thousands of other professions, and it certainly means that you cross paths with people on a reasonably regular basis. Candy, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you.
My name is David Nolan, and I'm the host of Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. Please visit our website, actuary.org, for a wealth of information about the work that the Academy does, and consider registering for our annual meeting coming up November 4th to 5th. And of course, please subscribe to this podcast on your preferred podcast platform.